Welcome back to One-on-One with Mr. U. Of course, I'm your host, Mr. U. We are live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook as always. And of course, if you're watching us for the very first time, thanks again for making us part of your week. We really appreciate your support of our show. And this show is all about advancement. We talk about actionable tips and strategies, to help you make the most of your day and the most of your life. So we're bringing in a very special guest today, professional speaker, nonprofit fund developer, mentor, and author of the books Giving Yourself Away and Intentional Living and Giving. Larry Onan's in the house with us today. Larry, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you very much, Mr. Yu. Good to be with you.
Same here, same here. You specialize in an area that I deal with a lot. It's very, very near and dear to my heart, and it's stewardship. I want to get into some of that, but give us a little bit of your background first, and then we get into the work that you're doing right now that can potentially help our listeners and our viewers. Go ahead, Larry.
Well, Mr. Yu, you can tell by my hair coloring that I'm on the older side of things.
That's
I'm 82
all right.
years of age, but I've spent over 65 years in related ministry activity, mostly working with nonprofit organizations, boards, leadership. And yes, a lot of what I was doing about raising a funding, but really the life of what I was doing was much more deeper. It was how to be a good leader, how to accomplish objectives, how to get your goals accomplished, things of that nature. But Mr. Yu, I didn't start off thinking I was going to do this for a living. I was really passionate about theater. I knew I was going to end up in New York or I was going to end up in Hollywood. I loved directing. I loved acting as well, but I loved the craft of taking something from nothing in a book and turning it into a stage show in a period of time. But at the University of Colorado, I had a little radical change when I realized that everybody, all my peers in the acting world were really acting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They had learned so well to act that they didn't know how to be themselves. And I was one of those people. I could do the job, but I started to realize this was a pretty empty way of living. And that took me into a radical shift to where I got into some leadership and helping other people get out of their messes and find direction in life. And, 60 years later, I'm still doing the same thing. I love it. So.
I love it, man. I really resonate with that part about the acting life in the theater and such. I'm from New York City originally, so I was very acclimated to, I guess, to the understanding of that culture, and I did a little bit of that in small doses, acting and doing a little theater, just in small doses again. But I thought that was my future as well. So got a detour here as well. So I'm excited about that.
It was a detour because I thought for about 5 or 6 years my life would be concentrated around the arts. And when I started to realize, if you're acting on stage, that's one thing, but you're acting all the time, 24/7. You didn't know who you were. You didn't know who anybody else was. You couldn't tell who was fake and who was genuine and who was real. And I had a radical spiritual experience in college. And I thought, I want to dedicate my life to helping other people get out of their mess. And that's really what changed my mind. So rather than going into acting, I became a part of a worldwide ministry that was working with students every place. My time was at the University of Pennsylvania, one of the Ivy League schools. And then I got into other kinds of things. I really fell into leadership more by accident. I didn't realize I had leadership qualities. I would be assigned to do something and I would do it and it came out pretty well. And others saw that and they started saying, we need to move you into a level where you can use your giftings. And thankfully, that's what happened to me. And I've had upsides and I've had hiccups and life is full of surprises.
Absolutely.
But it's how you deal with those surprises that make a great deal of difference in your outcome. And I just want to help people thrive because they've got purpose and focus in life. So it's kind of like, life is full of all these experiences, but you can either make yourself or break yourself in the involvement of how you engage and what happens in your life experience.
Yeah. A lot of your background, from what I can ascertain, Larry, you've done a lot of things in the realm of fund development for nonprofits, but also developing of people, developing of leaders. You were involved with Crew, which I'm very familiar with, Campus Crusade for Christ. You were involved with them, I think 18 years, I think it was.
Yes.
There are a lot of things even happening right now in our city and nationally that are going on. So really excited to see that kind of work. But when you hear the word stewardship, I'd love to hear what you think about that, because those people who you were talking about
Well, I
earlier.
think there's a real
Hold on, Larry. Let me finish answering the question first. And what I'm hearing is that, you know, a lot of people are so busy chasing, trying to get the next thing, that they haven't taken the time to realize what they already have, that they possess, that they're not using. So that's my experience. Love to hear yours about what stewardship means to you and what you're seeing in that. Go ahead.
Well, you know, growing up, Mr. Yu, I was raised as a preacher's kid, and I thought
Okay.
stewardship meant, okay, my dad's going to take the offering or preach on money. And for all my life, in fact, I think most pastors, even today in churches, think that they have got to talk about money 2 or 3 times a year, and it sometimes becomes a manipulative goal of getting people to be guilty of giving to what they need to have funding in their first objective. I'm
Yeah.
not against people attempting that, but I started to realize it was probably into my career of leadership. I was doing some very major fundraising things that were very successful, and so successful that I was invited to a meeting that I didn't really belong to. It was a
Hmm.
leadership meeting. They were talking about raising, in this particular case, $1 billion over a longer period of time. And somebody thought, well, Larry's been doing pretty well at this. We need to invite him in to hear what's going on. So when I got into the room, I knew I didn't belong there. But I thought, well, I was invited, so I'll sit here and keep my mouth shut. And the consultants that were being used at that time came in and said, we've done a feasibility study. This ministry can do what you want to do. The goal is not unreasonable, although it's huge, but you will never achieve your goal unless you start teaching lifestyle stewardship and expanding the base of many people giving joyfully. And there was an argument kind of in the room. The consultant said it was a necessity to make this work. The ministry at the time said, no, we're not into starting something else, especially about stewardship and money. And somebody in the room said, you know, it'd be good for Larry to research and tell us what lifestyle stewardship would be all about. And I
Okay.
had a yellow pad of paper and I wrote down, figure out what lifestyle stewardship is. And then at the bottom of the page, Mr. Yu, I wrote the words, you got the freedom to fail. Because I had no clue what stewardship was. I had this idea that it was all about money, and that's what it was about.
Yeah.
Stewardship is not about money, it's about managing somebody else's affairs. And I've been entrusted to be a steward. I don't own anything, I have nothing. Now, in the state of California where I live, they say I own a house and they charge me taxes every year. And I do trust, I have an entrustment of my house and I pay for the upkeep of my house. That's my stewardship responsibility. But I don't own the house. Everything in heaven and earth belongs to God. I don't own a pair of clothes. I don't own a car, even though I've got clothes in my closet and I'm entrusted with an SUV. So when I started realizing that I was managing this for the owner of everything, then I need to learn how to be an effective, good owner. And I call good, effective stewards authorized wealth distributors. They have got the
I like
authority
that.
given to them by God to distribute his wealth and his resources to those in need and meet the needs of other people. Well, one of the many things that an individual can give is money. But unfortunately, that's the hook that we think it's all about. I like the Old Testament. God was writing to Moses and the children of Israel, and he said to them basically, and this is Larry's loose interpretation, but you'll get the point. God said, I don't need your money. But he said, I need to have you learn to trust me in all things. It's amazing how money and the management of money helps us learn how to trust the owner of the money. And God said, I don't need it, but you need to learn how to give it so you learn how to trust me. And so the reason of even money being there, it's a tangible item. We have it in our pockets. We know how to deal with it in credit cards. I'm not anti-money, but money is simply a teacher to help me be a better steward. And as I learn how to relate to money and my time and my talents, my treasures, whatever they are, I become more effective as a steward. And so stewardship is a lifestyle. And if a person is focused on effective stewardship, they're going to live a life of contentment, of abundance, and they'll be thriving every single day. Even in the midst of chaos, you can still be thriving every day because you know who you are. And when I started to discover that, what had happened, Mr. Yu, that assignment was given to me and nobody ever followed up on that assignment. About 5 weeks later, I had a group of my leaders that I was working with, and I said, we need to figure this out. Whether they ask me the question of how I'm doing on the subject is one thing, but we need to figure it out. It may help us do a better job of what we're doing. Well, as the 5 or 6 of us that worked on this together, and I believe in teamwork that makes things happen. Yes, I was the leader of the team, but I tell you, I would not have any book today without that team diving in and the collaboration and the thinking of the entire team. Nobody
Absolutely.
gets anything done by themselves. And we started figuring it out. We started applying the biblical principles that we learned. We started seeing that God was graciously wanting to give to us, but he wanted to learn to trust us so that we could use his resources in an entrusted way to accomplish many things. And then we started talking and inviting other executives and leaders to understand the same principles, and they started applying it in their business. And literally tens of millions of dollars over the last 50 years have been released from stewards for God's work, not because they had to give the money, but because they were being good stewards of what was entrusted to them. And I think whether you are a UPS driver or you are an executive of a Fortune 500 company, you're still a steward. Are you going to be an effective steward or are you going to be a bad steward? You can't get out of being a steward. And some stewards are messing up things pretty badly and they have to live with the consequences of their mess ups. So there's a consequence, but there's great joy in seeing and great contentment that comes when you're living that life every single day. And the
Definitely.
book that I wrote was really just to help people get into the book side, help pass it on, multiply it to others, because I've been teaching and coaching and mentoring people in the same concepts ever since I began to understand what they really were.
I think we got time for one more question. I want to share a quick story first. You ever
Yeah.
heard the story of the guy that worked in construction and real estate and he was about to retire? And before he retired, he was given one last assignment to build one more house. Well, in his haste to retire and move on with his life and go to live on a beach somewhere and kind of live the retired life, he decided to take the offer to build that one house for his current employer one last time, but he cut corners on the house that he built. He did it, shoddily, with haphazardly, with taking shortcuts. And then after the house was built and he submitted, all the things that needed to be done, let his boss know that the job was done. His boss turned around and gave him the key to that house and said, "This is your house as a parting gift for your time of service in the company." Think about that story. Every time I think about stewardship, I'm like, you know what? You mentioned the UPS driver and people who are doing things that require stewardship, but they don't realize, you know what? This is not just something that you do. This is part of who you are. Your heart comes through in this work. So I love
That's
that
it.
story. It's a rough story, but
I've heard that story, and when you look at that, what was happening, he was a steward being sloppy in his stewardship, and the consequences, he got a house less than the quality that he was used to doing and he could do. And I think we've got to realize that every morning, and I do this, Mr. Yu, every morning I get up. First of all, I don't jump out of bed anymore. I stretch my ankles, I move my feet a little bit. I've learned that you walk a little bit better when you do a little bit of exercise before you jump out of bed.
makes sense.
But the other thing I also do is I say, as I'm sitting there and maybe stretching my ankles and just getting ready to walk for the day, I say, okay, God, this is your day. What do you want me to do today that enhances you and your kingdom and your purpose? Well, I'm making an intentional decision, Mr. Yu, at the beginning of every day that I will live an intentional life today. Now that I can, mess up once in a while. We all have hiccups. I'm not saying that life is perfect, but when
Sure.
I move life into the world of my mindset that this is going to be a productive day as a steward of God's blessings and resources, every phone call I make, every email I write, every engagement I've got, every time I talk to a clerk at a post office or at a grocery store, my job is to say, how can I impart part of what God wants me to do for that person? And so it's a mindset that I choose to live by. Now, it's because I have if you want to use the old term, theology. Yes, I understand there is a basis for that philosophy. And that's really what I concentrated on first is what is the core values and understanding of what a steward is. A steward understands that God owns it all. He understands that God is a giver. He understands that God wants me to ask other people to participate in what we're doing. He also wants me to understand the principles of the laws of the harvest. You don't plant something today and reap the harvest tomorrow. It takes time for the harvest to become full. And then I can give from God's abundant supply as I'm trusting Him. Well, those 5 principles, if I'm starting to live by those, I'm going to be giving my time, my talent, my treasure, out of my checkbook, whatever it is. And I'm going to be thinking, this is not mine. This is His. How do I wisely use it? So you start with an attitude of gratitude and an attitude of commitment to doing it. And the contentment is what drives us to say we can live this life every day, all the time, and be blessed. And that's why I like to help people become authorized wealth distributors. God planned for us to live an abundant life with His care. We're not living this life alone, and we're not just checking out and waiting for the big boss to show up at the end of time. No, He says every day is a day of grace. It's a day of enjoyment. It's an adventure. It's a purpose, and that's the way I live it.
I love it, man. One final question, Larry. First of all, thanks for being here and for sharing some of your wisdom with us regarding stewardship. We got to be intentional and effective in that regard. I want to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to ask you after that, let folks know where they can find your work. I have the website up on the screen, but if there's some other way people can find you, love to get that from you. But you wrote 2 books. You wrote Giving Yourself Away in, I believe, 84, and Intentional Living and Giving about 2 years ago or so. Can you find at least one point that connects both of these books as the reason why you wrote them? Is there one specific salient point, central point that kind of caused you to decide to write both of these books? After you answer that question, let folks know where they can find you. Go ahead.
Well, the name of the 2 books kind of tell you a little bit. The book in 85 was called Giving Yourself Away. Now, I was working off the same principles, Mr. Yu, in both books. I didn't change the principles, but I was realizing that in 1985, I was writing to an older audience that understood a lot about stewardship. It was a different culture, a different time. When I was in Ireland about 4 years ago, I was with a group of Europeans, probably a dozen of them, and they were commenting on how difficult it was to find biblical truth that helped people understand stewardship in the European context. And I left there thinking, the Alpha and the Z generation, the younger adults, say under 40 at least, this is a message they have never heard before. And so I said, I've got to go back to that message and restructure it for a new generation that is aiming into nowhere because they don't know what their purpose is for being here. And so I restructured it. I put it together around 2 parts. One's about the theology of the core message, and the other one is the practical way you live the life. And so intentional living and giving is helping a person become intentional every day in doing what God's designed him to do. And so there is a real linkage between the 2, but there's 35 years between the first and the second. And it's for an audience that is probably pretty ignorant of the truths that are in that book.
Absolutely. We got your website up on the screen. Larry Onan, O-N-A-N, for those that are listening but not watching us today, LarryOnan.com. I believe you can probably find his books there. And of course, perhaps a contact form to reach out to Larry and ask any questions you may have of him that he didn't get to answer here, or perhaps just the engagement conversation or collaborate with him.
Well, I'm glad to always interact with people. They can go to any book outlet in terms of getting a copy of the book. If they really wanted a signed copy, everything I send out from GaryOnan.com, I sign, Mr. Yu. But, you can go to Barnes & Noble, you can go to Books A Million, you can go to Amazon, look up Intentional Living and Giving, and you're going to find the book come up. And it's going to be a handbook for your life guidance and how you live an abundant life and thrive every day.
Thank you for coming on and sharing that. I think that this was a message for the time, for the season that we're in. Because a lot of us do stuff. We stay busy. You and I are both very busy people. We do things. But the stewardship part is something I think we don't think about very often. We don't realize, you know what? We don't just have the ability to do something. We have a responsibility to do something. So I thank you for what you shared about what we have in our hands and how we need to use it. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been great to be with you today.
Same here. Professional speaker, nonprofit fund developer, mentor, and author of Giving Yourself Away and Intentional Living and Giving, Larry Onan. If you're watching us for the very first time, thanks for making us part of your week. Please jump onto our YouTube channel or Apple Podcasts or both. Follow us. Let us know how you enjoyed the shows that we're doing. And if you want to support us financially, in the show notes, a couple of ways you can do that to help us keep this continuous journey going of all of our shows. But thank you for being here on One-on-One, Larry. It's been a pleasure. Thanks again, sir.
Thank you very much.
The pleasure is mine. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for watching and listening. That's Larry. I'm Mr. Yu. Have a great day. Thanks again.